أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وشفيء ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين سيما الحجة بقية الله الأعظم روحي وأرواحنا له فداء ولعنه دائم على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So one of the reasons why we underevaluate or undervalue actions because of their effects are a bit late. That's one of the main reasons why we don't consider actions to be very beneficial, or why we don't find it important to regulate our behavior. And you see, that itself is not an issue, but unfortunately we have this mindset. We want to see quick results. We live in a fast-paced world, therefore we are used to things happen or seeing results quickly. Let's say, for example, with this whole TikTok culture of ours, everything has to be less than 30 seconds. And then we swipe away straight away, right? We're not used to seeing results later or have patience with late results. Therefore, we want everything delivered straight away. And with the development of modern technology, unfortunately, it hasn't helped in terms of our patience. So we have this mindset, and unfortunately, a lot of us have adopted this mindset. No, we want to see results straight away. Not like we're going to have patience with results. While you see in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He speaks about even how He created this universe, He speaks of creating the universe gradually. Sittata ayyam, for example, or other verses where He defines that. Basically, the main point is, I created this universe gradually. It was created gradually. Things develop and evolve gradually. Therefore, you need to have patience. Imagine a person going to the gym, going to the gym. And after every session, he will expect some results. And he stands in front of the mirror. Well, normally we would say, that's a naive person. Imagine going 1 hour to the gym and expecting results. But we have this mindset when it comes to our practice and our religious actions. If we do something, let's say prayer, dua, and it doesn't have an effect, we don't see the results of it straight away, then we think, oh, it's ineffective. Why? Because we're used to seeing results quickly. While you see in the narrations we have from Ahlul Bayt, they say that one of the lowest type of patience that every believer should have is having patience with late results. In other words, don't expect your prayers to bear fruit straight away. So what, you prayed your prayers once or twice, for example. You prayed in Salatul Jama'ah. You stood up for Fajr, for example, or Salatul Layl even. Or even, sometimes we recite dua, for example, dua kumail. We think, oh, now I'm going to feel this spirituality, right? And then when we face the reality that we are not experiencing tranquility in our lives, we think, okay, dua kumail there must be something wrong with dua kumail. And not the lack of persistence within myself or my actions and my behavior, unfortunately. Why, you see, everything in this world happens gradually. But we have this culture, especially here in the West, where everything, we want to see quick results. Everything has to happen fast. We want to be served fast. And that creates a conflict. Because then we apply this same mentality to our acts of prayer, acts of worship, to our behavior as well. And then we try something for a short period. We see it doesn't bear fruit. We don't see any effect of it. Then we quit it. There's no persistence. But you see, Imam Baqir alayhi salam, in a beautiful narration, he states, إِنِّي أُحِبُّ أَنْ أَدُومَ عَلَى الْعَمَلِ إِذَا عَوَّدْتَنِي نَفْسِي. I love to get used to do something or do good, and I love to be persistent when I want to do good, so I can get used to it. And then he continues, وَإِنْ فَاتَنِي مِنَ اللَّيْلِ قَضَيْتُهُ مِنَ النَّهَارِ. If I miss out on it in the night time, I'll make sure that I'll make up for it during the day. And then he continues, وَإِنْ فَاتَنِي مِنَ النَّهَارِ قَضَيْتُهُ بِاللَّيْلِ. And if I miss out on something I was supposed to do during the day, and I miss out on it, I'll make sure to do it during the night. And then he says something which is very important, because this is the key word here that we should remember. What was our discussion about? That regulating our behavior is very important, more important sometimes than knowledge and faith. Not because it holds a greater value than knowledge and faith. No, because the only way that we can actually strengthen our knowledge and faith is through regulating our behavior. What kind of behavior? A behavior that is persistent. And this is what Imam Baqir alayhi salam he refers to. What is it that he says? وَإِنَّ أَحَبَّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ مَا دِيمَ عَلَيْهَا. The most beloved actions in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? The actions that we are persistent with. The actions where we actually are showing some persistence. But you see, we try something out, yeah, and because we're used to shorts, reels, I don't know, TikTok videos, we just swipe all the time. Oh, I tried this prayer, it didn't work out, then I have to leave it then. Sometimes a lot of youth, they come to me, they ask me this question, Sheikh, I've recited this dua, but I still can't find this tranquility. I still have this grudge against the person, this, that. I was like, for how long did you actually do it? Yesterday we spoke about the importance of turning your good deeds into a habit for yourself, so it becomes a part of your personality. So for how long did you actually practice it? Oh, I tried it once or twice, for example. Sometimes couples, when they come to me and I give them some advice on how to, let's say, for example, become a better husband, a better spouse, a better wife, they come back to me after a week and be like, Sheikh, it didn't work out. I was like, what do you mean it didn't work out? I just gave you an advice for 1 week ago. You think you're gonna build a strong family relation after all the problems you had? You will have strong family relations just a week after that? I'm not a magician. I'm giving you advice, but you're the one supposed to be persistent. It doesn't happen by magic. Maybe that's one of the wisdoms behind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep referring to how He created this universe and how it was created gradually. Maybe the wisdom behind it is because of this. In other words, have patience. Be persistent. Or else you're going to be like this person who turns up at the gym after every single session. Yeah? Or no, sometimes we have the other mindset. What is that? We do a lot at once and then we expect the results. Like a person who shows up in the gym and he works out for 10 hours and he ruins his body and his muscles and he just completely destroys himself, and then he expects results. No, be persistent. Be persistent. Development happens gradually. Understand this first and foremost. In another narration, very beautiful one from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, he says, "Man amila amalan min a'mal al-khayr." So sometimes we ask the question, so Sheikh, how long do we have to be persistent with a certain action in order for it to become a habit? Right? In order for it to become a habit. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he gives us the answer here. He said, "Man amila amalan min a'mal al-khayr." The one who does good, what happens? فَلْيَدُمْ عَلَيْهِ سَنَةً. Let him continue with that good deed for a year at least. And then he continues, وَلَا يَقْطَعْهُ دُونَهَا. He should be persistent for a whole year in order to expect some effects or some results from that action. Now you tell me, how many of us actually wake up for Salatul Layl and tried it for a year and were we persistent about it? I haven't. I can tell you that. None of us. And then we expect, because we wake up once or twice for Layali al-Qadr, and now I'm going to feel this spirituality. No. It's all about persistence. Being persistent. This lack of persistence, unfortunately, in our action, our behavior, leads to us not having the right perception of the religion and religious teachings. So we think these acts of worship are ineffective. You know what? One of the reasons why a lot of people, they seek towards new age spirituality in our society, where they want to, mindfulness, yoga, this and that, that's because of this. They think through some of these so-called spiritual acts of worship or things that they were inspired from Buddhism and Hinduism and through that they can change all the issues and problems and just turn them away in a second. In other words, because they expect quick results and they haven't got rid of this mindset yet, when they see that, look, when it comes to our acts of worship in Islam, we need to be persistent. No, I want a solution right here, right now. Therefore, I seek towards like this new age spirituality where I think through mindfulness, through doing this and that, I can solve all of my problems right here, right now. Even through those actions, you need to be persistent if you want to see the effects of it. The same applies to the acts of worship in Islam as well. We need to be persistent. So one of the most influential factors in our development is that we are persistent when it comes to our behavior. And look at the effects of it in a beautiful narration where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks to His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It's what we call Hadith al-Qudsi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks directly to His messenger. What is it that He says? Ya Ahmad. Listen to this beautiful narration. O Ahmad, inna al-abda idha aja'a batnahu wa hafidha lisanah. If my servant, he keeps his stomach a bit hungry and he protects his tongue. So this could be a metaphor for him not submitting himself to every desire that comes his way, that he keeps himself hungry. In other words, he's able to resist some desires in life. Yeah? Just as small. 2 acts of worship. حَفِظَ لِسَانَهُ, and he protects his tongue. Look what he says after. عَلَّمْتُهُ الْحِكْمَةِ, I will teach him about the wisdom. Remember what we said 2 nights ago? About creating the capacity for you to be receptive to the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look, He says, control your behavior, I'll give you wisdom. وَإِن كَانَ كَافِرًا, even if the person is a disbeliever, he doesn't even believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just by the fact that he strives a bit and he keeps himself hungry, he doesn't submit to his own desires all the time, that itself will be sufficient, and I will give this person wisdom. But there's a difference here. For a kafir, that becomes a proof against him on the Day of Judgment. As he mentioned in the narration, تَكُونُ حِكْمَتُهُ حُجَّةً عَلَيْهِ, on the Day of Judgment, this wisdom will be a proof against himself. So I gave you this, I gave you these blessings, you had wisdom enough. You were supposed to do what? Priest of Salawat. So you had wisdom. In other words, you should understand that there was a hereafter. You should believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it would be used as a proof against him. And then he continued, وَإِن كَانَ مُؤْمِنًا, like you guys, yeah? But if he's a believer and he controls his behavior, what happens? تَكُونُ حِكْمَتَهُ لَهُ نُورًا, it becomes a shining light for this person. Shining light, in other words, he will be guided. وَبُرْحَانًا, it will be a proof. In other words, he will find that self-insight. So he's not going to be confused. وَشِفَاءً, and it will be a relief for him. وَرَحْمَةً, and a mercy for him. فَيَعْلَمُ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ يَعْلَمُ, and he would gain knowledge of that which he didn't know of before. Create the capacity first and foremost. Look at the benefits of actually controlling your behavior or starting with your behavior first and foremost. Now you go try to find the solution in the box. You're not going to find it. It starts with your behavior. Create the capacity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you that wisdom, and you will be able to seek the knowledge that you were looking for. And you'll be receptive to that knowledge. It's not just going to be a burden for you. A burden you're going to carry around on your shoulders. And then he continues as well. And this is the beautiful part as well. وَيُبْصِرُ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ يُبْصِرُ, and he would see things he couldn't see before. In other words, he will have insight. What a beautiful thing. By just controlling your behavior, suddenly you will get insight. Allah, and the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is it that he says in a beautiful narration? قُدُّ أَبْصَارَكُمْ تَرَوْنَ الْعَجَائِبِ, lower your gaze from that which is haram for you, that which is unlawful for you, and you'll see miracles in this world. Suddenly he becomes sensitive about all the blessings he had in life, everything he took for granted. Now he notices all the small blessings in life, all the beauties in this world. He considered it to be the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that he looks at. Just like Sayyidah Zainab salamullah alayha. She saw nothing but tragedy, but she called it beauty. Why? Because she saw a brother that sacrificed everything for the sake of Allah. A lover who was reunited with his beloved. This is what you get from what? Regulating your behavior. Regulating your behavior, that's simple. Creating the capacity. And then he continues as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, فَأَوَّلَ مَا أُبَصِّرُهُ, the first thing that we will give him insight about, عُيُوبِ نَفْسِهِ, that is his own shortcomings and mistakes. You want to develop, you want to become a better Muslim, find out what you have of shortcomings, control your behavior a bit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you knowledge about that. He will give you insight about all your shortcomings and your mistakes so you can actually correct them. They say 50% of tawbah is what? Repenting is what? That you acknowledge what? Shortcomings and what mistakes you're committing. If you don't know what you have of the different shortcomings, what are you going to seek repentance about? For what? How are you going to seek repentance? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to tell him exactly what it is that you're seeking repentance for. So that's the first knowledge that he will give you, the first thing that he will give you insight about. حَتَّى يَشْغِلَ عَنْ أُيُوبِ غَيْرِهِ, and your shortcomings and your mistakes will keep you so busy that you won't focus on the mistakes and the shortcomings of others anymore. You will liberate yourself. Look how beautiful life becomes for such an individual. That you are kept busy with yourself to such an extent that your spouse, you don't see all the flaws and the errors and the shortcomings of your spouse anymore, the children anymore. No. You become an inspiration for the rest. Why? Because you're focusing on yourself. If everybody in a family, they had this mentality that, look, I have to carry out my duty. I have to focus on my own mistake, correct my own shortcomings to begin with, instead of focusing on your partner, there will be no fighting in such a family. There won't be any problems. Why? Because there won't be any hawa and nafs. There will be no ego for them to get in between this couple. Or to get in between the parents and the children anymore. And all of this started by what? Two things. أَجَاءَ وَحَفِظَ لِسَانَ. Regulating your behavior. And then he continues. It doesn't stop here. وَأُبَصِّرُهُ دَقَائِقَ الْعِلْمِ. And we're going to give him the most precise and detailed type of knowledge. حَتَّى لَا يَدْخُلَ عَلَيْهِ الشَّيْطَانِ, to an extent that shaitan has no authority over this person anymore. So every time he stands he's in a position, or he's put in a position where he's in doubt of something, he will never make the wrong decision. Why? Because he has the wisdom from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, He gave him the insight. So he make the right decisions everywhere. Even if shaitan tries to lure him into doing something, he's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. Look at the impact of actions, respected brothers and sisters. The impact of you controlling your behavior and being persistent about it. Being persistent about it. Can you compare? You can't compare it to nothing. Nothing. That's why you see there was a psychologist, a famous psychologist. For 30 years he was researching about the behavior of a human being. Yeah? How to control the behavior of a human being. But he had an issue himself. What was that? He couldn't quit smoking. So for 30 years he'd be researching about how to control the behavior of a human being, but he couldn't quit smoking himself. Do you know when he quit smoking? When he started to act upon the knowledge he had himself. And then he found the strength enough to quit smoking. For 30 years he'd been smoking and researching about behavior, but he wanted to quit smoking. He couldn't for 30 years. Why? Because he thought my solution is in the books, not acting upon it. Not acting upon it. And what was it exactly that he mentioned? He said, I controlled myself first and foremost. Yeah? What he called self-conditioning. In Ilm al-Akhlaq we have that as well. Imam al-Khumaini rahmatullah alayhi, he mentions it in his first hadith. And what is that? The concept that we call musharata, self-conditioning. Like put conditions for yourself every morning. Be like, today I'm not going to do this and that. This habit, I need to regulate it. I'm going to cut down on this, for example. Yeah? Put conditions for yourself when you start the day. And then he said, then I kept looking, having watchfulness when it comes to my own actions. I was aware, did I actually smoke? Did I do it? Did I reduce smoking or not? What we call, in Ilm al-Akhlaq, what is that what we call? So after musharata, we have something called muraqibah. where you're watchful over your own actions. So you tell yourself throughout the day, you remind yourself, look, I've put conditions, I've limited myself today. Be aware of that. You remind yourself of that contract you made with your own soul and your heart. Yeah? And then he said, in the end of the day, I would have self-accountability. And that's what we call muhasabah. That's what we call muhasabah. And he was persistent about it. So this guy researched for 30 years what he could find in the first hadith of Imam Khomeini. Yeah? And what we have from the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. In fact, Imam Kazim alayhi salam, in a beautiful narration, what is it that he states? He said, a person is not from amongst us if he does not hold himself accountable every single night. Every single night. And being persistent about it. If you hold yourself accountable, it's because you want to be persistent in your behavior and make sure that you do the right thing and you're persistent in doing the right thing. So the second principle that we need to apply to our lifestyle, respected brothers and sisters, in order for us to establish an Islamic lifestyle, is to be persistent in our actions. Always to be persistent. And do we learn something else from Ashura? It's all about persistence. Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, when he told him to leave the night before the battle of Ashura, what happened? How many of them actually left? They stayed, they were persistent. The reason why you and I, we can sit here today and call our Shia followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, was because of the persistence of our forefathers, or somebody before us, scholars or someone. That's the reason why we sit here today and commemorate Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Or else we wouldn't be here. Look at the importance of this concept. But you see, we live in a fast-paced world, and unfortunately we haven't adopted this mentality yet. We want to see quick results all the time. Quick results. Sheikh, now I tried to have patience with my wife, but it doesn't work. So how long did you try for? 3 days. Pack your bags, brother, come on. What do you mean 3 days? Be a bit persistent, have some patience. Sayyidah Zainab sallallahu alayha, you cry for her every single Muharram. Look at the patience of Lady Zainab sallallahu alayha. And then you cry for her and be like, oh, I can only have patience for 3 days? What is that? It's embarrassing. What is it that we're looking for? Is it spirituality? Listen to this hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us what's going to happen if we're not persistent, or if we don't act upon the knowledge that we have and being persistent about it. What happens? Inna Allah awha ila Dawood. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed to Prophet Dawood ala nabiyyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam. And what is it that He said? Inna adna mas ana sani' bi abdi ghayri amil bi'ilmih. The least I would do to a servant that doesn't act upon his knowledge, min sab'ina uquba, out of 70 different punishments. What is that? An anza' min qalbihi halawata dhikri. I would deprive his heart from tasting the sweetness of my remembrance. You want spirituality? Be persistent. Be persistent. If we don't act upon the knowledge that we have and we're not persistent about it, that's the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He takes away from us. That is tasting the sweetness of remembering Him. And what is it? He gives us a promise in the Holy Quran that it's only through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that hearts, they find tranquility. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ لَا تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. In other words, we will find no tranquility. To all the youth that are facing mental issues here in the West, there you go. The lack of persistence in our lives leads to us becoming depressed all the time. Because we don't find the tranquility. Why? We disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we expect, no, I read the Dua Kumail once or twice. Now, because I don't taste the sweetness of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, therefore, there must be something wrong with Dua Kumail. No. You were supposed to be persistent for at least a year, according to Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. According to Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And Ashura is all about persistence. All the Shuhada was all about persistence. All of them. And you see the people that actually, they understood this point and they drew inspiration from that. You see the effects of it as well. There was a young student, after he studied a bit in the Islamic seminary, he went back to his own country. He went back to his own country, and they started out with a handful of people. There weren't any followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam as such. Only a handful of people. He went back, but he was persistent. He could have said, look, I'm just going to move. I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to work with the community. I'm just going to leave everybody and I don't care. He could do that. And he had the money to do it. It wasn't like he was poor or anything. He stayed and he remained in that country. Not only that, he worked with the community to an extent that today you have millions of followers of Ahlul Bayt in that country. Millions. One after another of his sons got martyred in every Quds march. He was still persistent and he continued. After they tortured him and they imprisoned him, he was released. He went to Iran, he came back. He came back to his country and he stayed there. He could have stayed in Iran, where he would be secure. No issues, no problems, no. But he went back, even though that he knew 5 sons of his, they martyred all of them. Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki, Hafidahullah, he did something, and because of the persistence of this one person, one follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, and because you have understood the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, today you have millions of followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam in Nigeria. Because of the persistence of one man. He says something, it's very beautiful. He said, every Ashura, I tell the community to donate blood. He said, today there's nobody in Nigeria that receives blood from the hospital that can claim that the blood of a follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam is not flowing in my veins. Not one single. Why? Because millions of followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam to donate blood every single year. Everybody that receives blood in Nigeria gets their blood from a follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Look at the persistence. After they killed 5 of his sons, you know how difficult it is? You see, if the lack of persistence, unfortunately, it's also what leads us to become exhausted. And that's exactly what they try to do. The best example of that, you know what it is? That's like what Israel is doing right now. That's exactly what they're doing. They try to exhaust people from protesting. Some youth, they come to me and ask, Sheikh, now, for how long should we continue protesting? I was like, what do you mean, for how long? How long you've been crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam? He said, since the day of Ashura. I said, the same applies. Our fight against oppression is forever, until the day of judgment. What do you mean, for how long should we protest or speak out for Palestine? Or for any other oppressed people? We need to be persistent. They were like, yeah, but we feel like there's no effect of our protest. He said, it's not about effect. It's about you carrying out your responsibility. You have a duty. What kind of results are you expecting to see? That Netanyahu is just going to leave the country, all right, because you're demonstrating in Copenhagen or in Manchester or London? He's going to be like, you know what, we're just going to stop this war. Stop protesting in London or Manchester. Of course he's not. But you have a responsibility. You have a duty. Just like Yazid, he wasn't like, okay, because Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he came towards Kufa, I'm just going to stop this whole thing. He didn't. But Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he carried on. They want you to become exhausted. They want you to become tired. Why? Because they know, unfortunately, in this Western world, or in this Western society, the lack of persistence is widespread amongst the youth. We just want quick results. We expect everything to change within a second. Because we have this mentality, they're taking advantage of that as well. They're taking advantage of it. We should be clever, be persistent. Exactly what we learned from who? Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And you see, not being persistent, unfortunately, leads to some unwanted consequences. I'm going to give you one example from the history of Islam. And wallahi, from tomorrow, you're going to hate yourself in every single aspect of life where you're not persistent. For every single time you weren't persistent about something, you're going to hate yourself because you're going to think about this individual. You're going to think about this individual. Who was it? It was the son of a convert. His father, he converted when they conquered Mecca. Then his father converted to Islam. Not because he believed in Islam as such, He was like almost forced to. He's like, he saw the Muslims, they were gaining power, authority, they were becoming stronger. So this guy, he's like, I might as well convert to Islam. Or else yeah. So what happened? His son is born. His son is born. This son of his, he became one of the soldiers of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He became one of the soldiers of Imam Ali alayhi salam. But look at how the lack of persistence, what it led him to. Yeah. So he became one of the soldiers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. After some years, he became a veteran in one of the wars, fighting side by side with Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. After the battle finished, the war finished, you know what happened? He joined the Khawarij. A'udhu billah. From being a soldier of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he joined the Khawarij. Same person, a couple of years later, according to him, some historical sources, he claimed to be somebody who was a supporter of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. But in fact, he was one of the individuals that forced Imam Hassan alayhi salam into making a peace treaty with Muawiyah ra'natullah alayhi. So what happened? To begin with, he was a soldier of Imam Hassan of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He became a part of the Khawarij. Suddenly, he claimed to be a supporter of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, forcing him into making a peace treaty, making fitna amongst the followers of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and then he joins the army of who? Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Look at the lack of persistence. Look at the lack of persistence. He was confused, this person. He went from one camp to another. Khawarij, they had an issue, like on the surface, like they claim at least, that they had an issue with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. They say he's a kafir, we need to fight him. But he jumped from being a Khariji to being a soldier of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And then when he became a commander in Kufa, he was one of the individuals that turned people against Muslim ibn Aqil. After that, he was convinced into joining the army of Yazid, and he became this exact same person who ended up killing Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And that's Shimr. Look what the lack of persistence does to a human being. Jump from one camp to another. When we say that being persistent is important, you know what it is? It's because of what? Because actions has an influence on what you behave like you think. You think like you behave, sorry. It has an impact on your personality. It affects your perception of things. He wasn't persistent. With his actions, what happened? Jump from one camp to another, being a veteran in the army of the Imam of his time, to becoming a person who killed the Imam of his time. When I say that it's important, that's why we have this beautiful narration that says, "Ash-sharafu 'inda Allah subhanahu bihusn al-a'mal, la bihusn al-aqwal." You can say whatever you want to. Honor in Allah is what? Husn al-a'mal lies in your actions. It's all about your actions. That's why you see Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, what is it that he told the soldiers of Yazid on the day of Ashura? He says, فَقَدْ مُلِيَتْ بُطُونَكُمْ مِنَ الْحَرَامِ. Your stomachs have been filled with that which is unlawful for you. That's why you're standing on the wrong side. Actions, behavior. فَتُبِعَ عَلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ. And therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sealed your hearts. What is it that he tells us here? That the people that are on the wrong side of this battle are only there because they didn't control their behavior. Their stomachs got full of that which was unlawful for them, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He completely sealed their hearts. There you go, standing on the wrong side. Standing on the wrong side. So if we say that, look, it's important for us to be persistent in our behavior when we want to act upon Islamic teachings, it's because our behavior has a huge impact on our perception, our knowledge, and our faith. A huge impact. And in order for us to create the capacity of being receptive to the knowledge, it starts with our behavior. Control that first and foremost, and be persistent in you controlling your behavior. Or else we end up like these mal'ooneen. That's why Ayatollah Bahjat rahmatullah alayhi, he said something beautiful. He said, in the heart of every human being lies a potential Yazid ready to break out if they don't control themselves. And it's true. You think this person, he stood up when he was fighting side by side Imam Ali alayhi salam, he told himself, I'm just going to do this, but in the future I will kill Imam Hussein alayhi salam. No, it happened gradually. Corruption starts gradually. But it all stems from what? The lack of control over your behavior. Lack of control over your behavior. In a narration, Sayyid ibn Tawus, he narrates about Qasim ibn al-Hasan alayhi salam. It is narrated that Qasim ibn al-Hasan, when he wanted permission from Imam Hussein alayhi salam to go to the battlefield, there's different narrations. Some mention that there was a letter he had from his father, but according to the majority of the historical sources or the maqatil that we have, they don't speak of a letter. They speak about a young man coming to his uncle, begging for permission to go to the battlefield. And when he wanted to go to the battlefield, he fell down on his knees and he started kissing the hand of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he kept refusing. He said, no, I'm not going to let you go. I already lost one amana from my brother Imam Hassan al-Mustafa. Should I lose the second one? You see, Qasim ibn al-Hasan, he was only a young man, a young child at the time where Imam Hassan al-Mustafa alayhi salam, he passed away. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he considered to be his own son. He basically raised him. But not only was it his son, he was also his nephew and his amana from his brother, Imam Hassan al-Mustafa. What is it that the narration says? He said, when Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he gave the permission to Qasim ibn al-Hasan to go to the battlefield, he didn't look at him, but he was shedding tears at the same time. He was too embarrassed to look at him. Then the narrator says, a moonlight radiant face came out and went to war. Ibn Fudayl inflicted a wound on his holy head. He struck his head. Sayyid ibn Tawus, he narrates, فَوَقَعَ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. He fell down on his face. You know what the worst part of this is? It's not the first time that Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he sees one of his family members falling down on his face. He entered his house with Imam Hassan al-Mustafa alayhi salam as a child. He came in and he asked Asma, he said, Ya Asma, is our mother sleeping? Asma turned around and said, no, your mother is not sleeping. She doesn't answer me. Quickly rush towards the masjid and tell your father that your mother Fatima has departed from this world. Hassanain alayhi salam, they rushed to the masjid. They told Ali ibn Abi Talib, our mother Fatima has departed from this world. فَوَقَعَ عَلِي عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. The conqueror of Khaybar fell down on his face. The conqueror of Khaybar fell down on his face. Now Imam Hussein alayhi salam for the second time is witnessing a family member falling down on his face. And this time he doesn't have his brother Imam Hassan alayhi salam to be there for him. But this time it's the son of Imam Hassan al-Mustafa. Qasim, he shouted out, oh my uncle, help me. Imam Hussein alayhi salam rushed like a praying eagle and struck Ibn Fudayl with his sword. Ibn Fudayl gave out a loud yell. Hearing his yell, his army rushed to save him. But the horses crushed the blessed body of Qasim, and thus he was martyred. According to the narration, it says that when Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he arrived next to Qasim, he hugged Qasim ibn al-Hasan and he carried him towards the tents. But unfortunately, the narration states that his feet were dragged in the sand. One of our scholars, he says there can only be two possibilities. One of them be that Imam Hussein alayhi salam felt so broken that he couldn't stand straight anymore. The second possibility is that The horses have crushed little Qasim so much that he was torn apart. So when Imam Hussein alayhi salam tried to carry him towards the tents, his feet were dragged in the sand as well. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.